Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 311 of The Team House. I'm Dave Park. Jack Murphy is currently on a top secret mission. Our guest tonight, Jim Sisco. Jim, thank you so much for being with us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, Jim is a former Marine, Recon, and Naval Intelligence. And before we get to Jim, I'm going to shout out to our sponsor so we don't have to interrupt the show. If you sleep hot at night, you know just how disruptive it can be. Whether you're having trouble falling asleep, you're waking up sweating in the middle of the night, or all of the above. That's where GhostBed can come in. As the makers of the coolest beds in the world, GhostBed is your go-to for cooling mattresses, cooling pillows, and even cooling bedding. From their signature Ghost Ice fabric to patented technology that adjusts with your body temperature, every GhostBed mattress is designed with cooling in mind. So whether you want a plusher mattress that cushions your shoulders and hips, or a firmer option with exceptional support, your GhostBed will keep you cool and comfortable all night long. When you purchase a GhostBed mattress, your comfort is guaranteed. You can try out your mattress for a 101 nights risk-free and make sure it's the right fit for you. Plus, they offer free shipping, and most items ship within 24 hours. If you're not sure which GhostBed is for you, check out their mattress quiz. You'll answer a few questions and get your personalized recommendation, or reach out to their friendly team of sleep experts for all the help you need. Even better, Team House listeners can get 50% off site-wide for a limited time. Just visit ghostbed.com/house and use code HOUSE at checkout. Again, that's ghostbed.com/house with code HOUSE at checkout to save a whopping 50% off site-wide. Check out their pillows, their bedding, their mattresses. Everything they got there is great, folks. Jim, back to you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Hey, I am feel privileged to be here, to be honest with you. Listened to a couple of your podcasts, and Gus were incredible. Hopefully I'll be able to live up to their standards and yours.
We appreciate it. We 100% live up to standards, so we deeply appreciate you being here. Excuse me, I got a little tickle. So let's start with your origin story. How did you start out? Who were you? How did you grow up, and what led you to the military?
So I grew up in New Jersey and really wasn't academically, inclined. I grew up middle class, and my dad was a union guy, and I remember he, kind of was pushing me to go to the union, and the other thing is my family life wasn't that structured. My mother was married 3 times, my father was married 3 times, so I was always in, divorce and, issues like that. So it wasn't a good foundation for me, and I wound up living with my grandparents for a couple of years, which was probably the best thing for me. They really were able to instill like those old school traditional values and help me with that. But I really knew that I wasn't ready for college or, further my education. And I really decided that I wanted to serve in the military and decided that I was going to join the Marine Corps.
And was there a reason you chose the Marines?
Honestly, I didn't know about the SEALs at the time, and I learned about the Marine Corps in Force Recon and Recon, so that really drove my decision-making. In retrospect, knowing about the Special Forces community, I most likely would have joined the Army to go to SF or the SEAL teams.
Yeah. So, so where did you enlist? What happened? And most importantly, were you San Diego or Parris Island?
So this is pretty funny. I actually joined the Marine Corps on September 11th, 1986. The significance of that day. Shipped out to Parris Island. So that answers your question. And I was the 3rd Battalion I Company guy. And everybody knows about Parris Island, 3rd Battalion, all by themselves. and wound up being an honor grad out of boot camp. And it kind of set the tone for my career, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And so you are infantry, I assume.
I had a contract for infantry, but I knew that I was going to take the recon in doc. And, back then it was a lot different. 1986, the recon in doc, you get in a bus at infantry training school and they ship you out in this cattle car and all of the windows are blacked out and you show up at Onslow Beach in North Carolina. And the minute you get off that cattle car, you have people yelling at you and screaming, throwing water on you. And you go through the entire in-doc. I believe we had 80 or around 80 something people trying out for recon. And when it was all said and done at the end of the day, I think there was 4 of us or 5 of us.
Wow. And how long was that? Was the in-doc?
The in-doc is almost all day long. You start off with a ruck run where they have all of these Alice packs laying out there ready for you. They have sandbags in them and they're wet. And you put the Alice pack on your back and they start you off at the battalion headquarters. And you run out past the scuba locker all the way to the end of the island and back. And that's the first evolution. And then it's obstacle course and push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups. And the one break you get is when you transit from recon to Area 5 pool and you do the swim part of the in-doc. So you get a little break, about 20, 30-minute drive over there. And then you have the swim portion. And the funny thing that I remember is there were a lot of people who made it, and then once we got to the swim portion, people were just dropping left and right.
Yeah.
And then you get back into the bus or the cattle car and you go back out to Onslow Beach and you do some of the psych drills and training and things of that nature. But
yeah.
And then 5 of us were left.
So the in-doc is like one day where they just like peel everybody apart. The people who already have it and the people who don't, basically.
Yeah, and then when you get to actually when you check into Recon Battalion, you go through RIP, Recon Indoctrination Program, and that's 30 days long. And everybody talks about the SEAL teams and like they talk about Hell Week and BUDS, and most SEALs will tell you when you get through Hell Week, then it's just like a 9-to-5 job. You go through the different phases, but back then in Recon, you went through RIP and it was just 30 days of being tortured, and it sucked.
Yeah. Was there any learning during that, or was it pure selection?
No, there was a lot of learning. I mean, there was land nav, there was, patrolling, there was, we had the rappel tower there. We did train, but it was, you get done training, you go, the chow hall is there on the island. There, you just can't escape. And then the NCOs would come in at like 3 o'clock in the morning drunk and wake you up and, take you on. And I talked about this in one of my podcasts, and I wrote it in one of my manuscript episodes. I remember there was a NCO who had a Toyota pickup truck, and the NCOs were in the back of the pickup truck drinking beer, and they tied a rope to the trailer hitch bumper, and the rope was behind the vehicle, and at the end of the rope were like 8 nooses, and they pulled us out and they put the nooses on our neck, and they would drive the truck down the beach, and we're running, at night, nooses around our neck. And I remember at one point, like one of the guys up front tripped on something and everybody fell, and they didn't stop the truck. They just kept driving, and we're like holding on to the ropes and getting pulled. And finally one of them was like, "Hey, stop the truck." And so that's the environment that we were exposed to for 30 days. And there was no you're hazing or anything like that. We were out on the island by ourselves. They just did whatever they wanted. But there was also some fun things that happened. Like one time they pulled us out individually and we went to the back of the NCO quarters, and they had this stump, and they're like, "We're going to axe claw you today." And we're like, "Okay, it's cool. And take your cover off, blindfold you." All right, we put a quarter on the stump, and then you have this axe, and they're all cheering. "No, a little to the left, to the right, you missed it," as you're like hitting the axe on the stump. And they take the blindfold off and your cover is just in pieces,
Yeah.
So there was like fun, but it was kind of torture.
Yeah, the 80s were kind of wild, weren't they?
Yeah, there was, I remember there's just drinking, smoking, it was, one time we were driving back to Onslow Beach, and we had gone out to the Brown Bagger in the Bayou on Court Street. And literally we would pick the person who was the most drunk and make them drive and play with the lights, turn them off, and play with the windshield wipers, the radio on the whole way back.
Yeah.
And it was just a different time. That is how I can describe it.
Yeah, yeah, an unsafer time. And so,
yeah,
yeah. So once you get done with INDOC, are you officially a Recon Marine?
No. So you finish RIP, and then you're put into your order of when you're going to go to class.
Okay.
And that's Amphibious Reconnaissance School. And then once you get done with Amphibious Reconnaissance School, that's, basically the milestone, and then you are considered a Recon Marine.
Okay. So how is it that, like, when you get out to your battalion for Battalion Recon, and you haven't been a line dog, right? You haven't spent any time on the line. Do they respect you more or less? What's the impression of, like, the Marines in general to young Recon Marines?
I believe once you're graduated from Amphibious Reconnaissance School, you're accepted. Okay. I mean, you've gone through RIP, and then you've gone through ARS, and you're training with the probably the same guys for the couple months, and your ARS class is about 40 guys or 50 guys, so it's similar to BUDS.
Yeah.
Except it's just a lot longer.
Yeah.
And you're accepted.
How long is the ARS class, or the Amphibious Reconnaissance?
I believe when I went through, it was almost 3 months.
Okay.
We also had our amphib phase was down in Key West, because I went through in a winter, which sucked because we're in Virginia Beach at Fort Story, and we're jumping in the water all the time. And, it was, I still hate the cold.
Yeah.
I just despise the cold.
Yeah.
It's my kryptonite. And, but then we went down to Key West for our amphib phase, and so it was about 3 months.
Okay. And then for the people who don't know, can you describe the difference between battalion reconnaissance and force reconnaissance?
Basically, it was the mission. For when I was in from 1986 to 91, the Special Forces community was still evolving. There was no MARSOC, JSOC, and SOCOM were kind of like, so it really was, we were supporting the division, and Second Marine Division. We would go out on cruises with them, and we would be the reconnaissance arm for the division. And where Force Recon really and that's when they started doing direct action, HRT, and so that's when they evolved and kind of took on that mission. For us, me personally, I was always envious, because they had built us a Halo school, and they were doing all the cool stuff, and we were still like, patrolling and doing, the traditional reconnaissance mission,
right? Which
I enjoyed. I truly did.
Yeah, you guys were doing a lot of the LURS type of like reconnaissance for a unit that was using that reconnaissance for direct for whatever maneuvers they were doing.
Yeah, and I think the culmination is when we were on our amphib cruise on the 22 Mu, and that's when you got to really execute everything. And that was, for me, it was like that was the best part of my time in the Marines before Desert Storm, going out on cruise and, doing these operations in Sardinia and, in different places. And I really enjoyed it.
So kind of fast forward then to 91, if we can, unless there's anything you want to talk about, Desert Storm, what happened then for you guys?
So, funny story. I am at the end of my enlistment. I have a 4-year enlistment, and I'm already checking out. I have my checkout sheet in my hand, and my last, person to meet with is the battalion commander and the sergeant major. So I go walking in, and by that point, I had established myself as one of the better operators. I always strive to be technically proficient. So I had the respect of, my peers and a lot of the officers. And I remember walking in and I'm like, hey, Sergeant Major, what's going on? He's like, hey, Jim, come on in. And I'm like, okay. He's like, just go in and see the CO. And I'm like, Roger that. And I walk in, I'm like, hey, sir, how's it going? Because I'm short timer, I'm happy.
Right.
And he goes, hey, Jim, listen, I got some good news and bad news. Just go ahead and sit down. And I'm like, okay, what's going on, sir? And he goes, what do you want, the good news or the bad news? And I'm like, just give me the bad news. And he goes, well, the Marine Corps in its wisdom has ended all EOAS, end of active service, for the needs of the Marine Corps. Desert Storm is kicking off and you're not going to be able to get out. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the good news? And he said, the good news is you can either go back to Charlie Company and you can probably try and get your team back, or you can go to headquarters, or we could try and transfer you. And I'm like, well, hell that. I mean, I spent 4 years here training to go to combat. I want to go back to Charlie Company. And I did. And, but that had its own story. But I think 4 months later, in Saudi Arabia in Desert Storm.
Yeah. And then what kind of mission did you guys have during Desert Storm?
So that was the weird part, because nobody really understood Desert Storm. Like when I wrote a book and I talk about it. It was 1991. The Iraq Army was the 6th largest army in the world. Everybody they had used mustard gas and biochem weapons against the Iranians. They had like hundreds of thousands of troops and artillery pieces and tanks. They were fighting Iran for decades. And everybody thought that, we were going to have this, prolonged, protracted war and hundreds of thousands of deaths and casualties. And nobody really knew the mission. And we were in a unique position because we are now going to do mobile reconnaissance. And we're like, what's that? I mean, I've been training in jungles in cold weather, regular terrain. And now here we are in the desert. We don't have any SOPs. We've never done it. We're just getting the first evolution of the pluggers GPS. And I actually went to Celestial Navigation School for 3 weeks to learn how to navigate off the stars.
Wow.
So imagine what you're coming into.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you guys got there, can you tell us like your experience there?
Yeah, so we get into Camp 15, and it's a sprawling metropolis. HESCO barriers, tent cities everywhere. It's just people crammed in there. Very uncomfortable for me, very uncomfortable for us, because we want to be out, we're operating. We don't want to be stuck in a, basically artillery position, And our time was trying to learn the environment and learn our operations. I mean, the first times we were out there walking in the desert.
Yeah.
I mean, how insane was that? And carrying the 50 cal, and we're like, this is not going to work.
Right.
And, so then we started understanding the mission set a little more. And we started, taking the 50 cals and mounting them into the Humvees, the Mark 19s, and trying to figure out how we're going to do everything. And the best part was when we left Camp 15. And Camp 15 was okay. You had some hot chow and you had some showers and things like that. But the minute we moved like 110 miles north, and we were about 10 miles off the border. And for me, I was happy in a way because we were away from that.
Right.
But the other thing, it was so isolated, and you didn't have all the creature comforts. We didn't have showers. We didn't have hot chow. We're eating MREs every day. At one point, I went 48 days without a shower, which was pretty cool and pretty disgusting because your body starts growing things that you never even know.
Yeah. And then how long were you guys out doing that?
I mean, we were out there until the ground invasion.
Okay.
We were out there. And the worst part was the insanity of the Marine Corps. They have a way of just doing the stupidest things and with no logic or justification. Like, we would move every couple days, and we moved like 10 clicks or 5 clicks, and you're like, why? well, they might know our position or this or that. And that was the op tempo with stand to and stand down, and no hot chow and no showers, and just sleeping in sleeping bags. After a while, it was a grind. It just kind of weighed on you emotionally and physically and psychologically.
Yeah. And so then when the war kicked off or the invasion started, did you guys cross the line?
Yeah, well, I want to tell provide a quick vignette.
Yeah, please.
So remember I told you I was still trying to figure out my place at Charlie Company. We had rearranged the teams. So I was in headquarters, but I was supposed to be a team leader. I was going to be an ATL. And the teams in my platoon did their first mission. And they went out on mission, and I volunteered to be on radio watch. And we had problems where one of the teams got compromised. I was part of the extract team. I went in and helped get them out. And it was pretty cool doing that, but I still felt jaded because I wasn't out with the teams.
Sure.
But we came in and we're sitting down, and it was Mike Cook and myself and Woody, Doc, and a couple other people. We're sitting around in a circle, and we're just reading letters, eating chow, and just bullshitting. And Lance Corporal Stroud says, "Hey, Corporal Sisco, could you help me with the KY gear? The KY gear for the radios." And, typical Marine fashion, I'm like, fuck you. What are you, a retard? Do it yourself. And everybody just starts laughing, And Mike looks over at me and he's like, bad dog. And I was like, yeah, that was kind of a dick move. So I got up and I walked over to Stroud and I started helping with the KY gear. And I was over there for about, I would say 45 seconds to a minute. And I heard this large explosion. Boom. And this explosion was from where I was sitting. And I went running back. First instinct, I go just running back. And I get back, and Mike had been taking his 782 gear off. And we had our grenades, and hooked on the little clips. And we would always take the thumb clips off and kind of straighten out the pins a little so it'd make it easier if you had to pull them. Don't know what happened, but I believe one of the pin got caught on the 782 gear. The grenade fell between his legs and exploded. Both arms were gone. Powder burn. When people see the movies and see all the blood guts, that's not the way it is at all. And excuse me. Everything's black, and you just basically the camis were all shredded. And I remember I just looked at him. I was the first person there. I looked at him and I'm like, I can do trachs and I can do IVs, but I'm like, I can't do anything with this.
Yeah.
And his head just slumped down, and the corpsman knocked me out of the way, and they extracted him. And he's out on the CH-46 5 minutes later. So that was a very traumatic experience. First time I've ever seen something like that magnitude. But I knew that the invasion, the ground invasion, was the next day. So the other part of the story is this. I had a friendship with Mike, and I felt kind of guilty that I was sitting on him. So when somebody dies or gets killed in combat, you have to go through and separate their gear, their personal effects, and their military gear, and the personal effects get sent back home. And I'm like, hey, I'll do it, And I'm going through all his gear and separating thing, and I have a notebook, and I have to write down what's personal, his headphones and Sony Walkman and things like that. And I get down to the bottom of his pack, and I open up his wallet, and I'm like, one Pennsylvania driver's license, one credit card, one Social Security card, and I go into the side of the billfold, and I pull out a picture, and I turn it over, and it was a picture of my girlfriend. And I look at the back of it, and it says, "Love, Ashley." At that moment in time, I'm overcome by an emotion that I could never really explain to anybody.
Yeah.
Your friend dies, an hour ago, and now you find out that your girlfriend and him are hooking up.
Yeah.
And I remember I just took a seat for a second, and the gunny sergeant said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, just give me a minute." And I walked out in the desert, and it just started sucking down a couple of Marlboro Reds, and came back in and was like, all right, I'm good. Let's get this done, And that night, I went back to my hooch, and I had Jack Daniels in my canteen. My dad would send it to me. And I just started drinking and smoking, and grabbed my Beretta 9mm, and I came out, and I got Koontz, and I'm like, you're going to tell me what's going on. And so, a couple people in the platoon knew, and, they let me know what was going on. And I just put it away. I compartmentalized it. I was like, okay, done. The next morning, we are moving towards the breach site. I am in the back of the Humvee behind the 50 cal. We have Guns N' Roses, Welcome to the Jungle playing on our boombox. We have American flag on the whip antenna. I have a green cravat on my head, bandana, a pair of black Oakleys on, and we're just driving to the breach site. And everybody we're going by is just screaming, "Oorah!" And, because they're all in MOP level 2 and MOP level 4, all staged. We pull up to the breach site probably 15, 20 minutes before we have to go through. The APCs come and they launch the Bangalore torpedoes. They blow up everything in the minefield. Engineers put engineering tape up, and they're like, go. And we just go right across.
Yeah.
And we were the lead element for 2nd Marine Division. And we were just mobile recon. And that was kind of like how I dealt with everything, because I didn't have any time, and I'm like, mission first.
It's that is a very specific story that I don't think a lot of many people can relate to. But having issues back home when you're deployed like that, and pre Skype, pre-internet and emails, like pre all of that, you just had to bury stuff, right? You just had to swallow it and do your job.
Yeah, I mean, think about this. We were still writing letters,
right,
and getting care packages. I would have to wait online for about an hour and a half to 2 hours back when I was at Camp 15 to get on a USO phone for 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes you would call and you couldn't get through, or then I have a list of phone numbers. It's not like you have your cell phone. You're like, dad, mom, brothers. Right. You have to write down numbers. So it was really weird trying to manage that and compartmentalize it. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't until I wrote the book and I started processing all this and to understand how it had an impact on my entire life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even in the modern age, with all those means of communication, when there are issues back home, it's one of those things that I don't think most people understand. That everybody has either had to deal with it or has been around somebody who's had to deal with it, and manage emotions, manage feelings of helplessness, manage these things, and still conduct operations.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. I don't want to, have this podcast, take a dark path and
Sure.
stay down that path. I had some amazing experiences in Desert Storm, and things that I will remember forever. And one of those being that I was able to get intel. I had dated another corporal, female Marine, prior to deploying, and prior to started to date Ashley, and she was in Desert Storm, and I wound up finding out. I was walking through Camp 15, and I hear, "Hey, Sisco," and I'm like, "Belinda, oh my God." And so she started giving me intel because she worked in the J2 for division. And I would take the intel because our officers were just kind of worthless, to be honest with you. And they weren't giving us everything we need for mission planning and for, doing the reconnaissance missions. And I got the intel, and I would disseminate it and share it with all the other team leaders, and everybody loved it. And one night, the gunnery sergeant found my Jack Daniels. He found my intel. He reported me to the lieutenant. The lieutenant was like, "Oh my God," And so they're going to bring it to the CO, and the CO, because Corporal Sisco, you're violating this and violating that, and how do you have this top secret information? And And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not going to spill the beans and tell them, where did you get it? I'm like, none of your business. And so they bring me into the CO, and the CO, like I said earlier, he had a good rapport with me, knew me, technically proficient, one of the better operators. And he's like, and we found this, and he's got Jack Daniels, and where's he going to get this, sir? And so the CO's looking through all the intel. He's not saying much. And he's looking at me, and he goes, hey, Jim, where did you get this? And I'm like, I can't tell you, sir. And he goes, that's okay. He goes, can you get more of this? I can go anytime I want. All I got to do is drive back to Camp 15. And he's like, just keep getting that stuff and give it to me first before you disseminate it. And I was like, roger that, sir. And he looks at the lieutenant and the gun, and he's like, are you still here? And that was kind of, that vignette kind of explains my time in the Marine Corps, but also my time as a Naval Intelligence officer, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
I was always pushing the envelope. I was always just doing things that were fun and always looking at the mission, but always just skirting the boundaries, if you want to say that.
Yeah. So you guys are the first across the breach. And what were your specific mission sets at that time?
We didn't have a mission set. Honestly, they were like, just drive. We're going to Kuwait City. I'm like, okay. And we're doing like 30, 35 miles an hour in our Humvees and, screaming through the desert. And we start seeing like Iraqis, like onesies, twosies, like surrendering. And we're like, what do we do? We can't stop the vehicle, get out, search them, see if they have weapons, the typical 5 S's. We're like, just keep going. I mean, sometimes we're throwing MREs at them, because they were so hungry. And then we started encountering like larger numbers, groups and bigger. And we still were like, we just can't stop because they're on the radio. You just keep going. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And didn't engage in any firefights or anything like that. And then we start seeing ahead of us Kuwait City on the horizon. So we know we're getting close. We're only a couple clicks out, maybe 10 clicks, 12 clicks out. And I remember this vividly. There's high tension wires all over the place, oil wells and high tension wires. And when we were in Kuwait, I mean, I could send you pictures. There's just oil wells, fire burning everywhere. There's oil in the air. It would be like, it looked like it was 7 o'clock at night in the middle of the day. And so we're driving along and, haze with the smoke and the oil in the air. And we're pulling up near these high tension wires out of nowhere. I mean, we just get lit up.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Humvees stop and we get in position and I'm on the 50 cal and I'm like, get some. I'm like loving it. This is my first combat experience. So this is what I trained for. And I'm on the 50 cal and we're just sending, my tracers flying down range and bullets ricocheting like 10 feet up, above my head on the high tension wires. And for some reason I looked over and out of the Humvee and I see somebody just jump out of the other Humvee and they're M16, because we had the M16 A1s and A2s back then. Mm-hmm. That's how old I am. M4s weren't even thought of. And he jumps behind the tire of the Humvee. And just my nature, I'm not having any of this. And I just jump out. I grab the A-gun. I'm like, get on the gun. And I jump out of the Humvee. I'm just running across. And I get over to this, ball of humanity and just kick him as hard as I can right in the head. He looks up at me. And I looked down at him and I was in shock. It was this gunny who had it out for me. And I go, get in the fight. And I run back. So the time I got back, I think this whole thing, 45 seconds, maybe 30, 45 seconds. And in the initial part of the firefight, everything together about a minute and a half. And all of a sudden, ceasefire, everybody's screaming, ceasefire. And figured out that we were the lead element for 2nd Marine Division. We encountered the lead element for 1st Marine Division. And I wrote in my book, the world's most elite fighting force encounters the world's most elite fighting force for 2 minutes of sustained combat. No No WIAs, no KIAs.
Right.
We were lucky. We
Yeah.
were really lucky.
Yeah. So from here, you guys roll into Kuwait City. Is that sort of your end state for
Yeah.
for what was planned?
Yeah, see the clover leaf of death and the roads with just hundreds of thousands of vehicles and dead bodies, and we're done. War is over.
Yeah.
We do a couple more missions over the next couple days, but basically, war's over.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how did that sort of, so you guys kind of, how long did you spend there before you redeployed back to the States?
That was the other issue. The war's over. We want to leave, and we're stuck in the desert and are 5 miles, 10 miles off the border, bouncing around doing stupid shit on watch, and before we go back to Camp 15. And so it was a little while. And the first milestone was getting back to Camp 15.
Right.
Just get back there to humanity, take showers, eat hot chow, use the phones and things like that. And that took about 3 to 4 weeks, as I remember.
Wow.
And then once we got back to Camp 15, then it was the arduous process of pack up, all that. So that was another 3 or 4 weeks. So it was just a time sunk, and it sucked.
Yeah. So 2 months roughly goes by. You get back to the States. Now you're, are you now eligible to leave service, to leave active?
So yes, but hold on. Before I leave the States, before we get back to the States, I have this Belinda issue. I have the intel issue. I have the alcohol issue, and all of these things are happening, and I'm concerned what's going to happen to me.
Right.
And the cowardness under fire with the gunny. So basically, everything is forgotten. And they're like, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. But I still had the Belinda issue because we developed a relationship over there. And it turns out, wind up having sex, hooking up. And I start having a relationship. And then out of nowhere, it's a couple weeks before I'm getting ready to supposedly head back. She comes to me and says, I love you. I'll always love you, but I can never see you again. So the trauma that I had for the Mike dying and Ashley, and then Belinda doing this, and she's like, the best thing you can do is just walk away. And I just turned around and walked away because at that point, I was just like, I'm done.
Right.
I checked out.
Right.
Turns out 30 years later, we reconnect on Facebook, and she tells me that she had been sexually assaulted and raped by a couple of the senior enlisted that she worked with because they found out that she was giving me the intel, and they threatened her if they said anything that they would tell
Oh my God.
that she was giving me intel. And so I don't know this is happening, and I just leave and I get on a plane in a boat, and next thing you know, I'm in Camp Lejeune. We fly into Cherry Point, and then I'm on a bus, and I'm back at Camp Lejeune. I'm back at Onslow Beach. Imagine this. Bands playing, husbands, wives reuniting, families there, crying girlfriends, children they haven't seen. I'm all by myself. Not one person from my family showed up. I get on the bus to go to Onslow Beach. Everything in my mind. I get to Onslow Beach and I just do what I know how to do. Hey man, I'll be in charge of the debark party. I got it. And I've been working my ass off, loading sea bags out of trucks, doing everything for like a couple hours. And I'll never forget, I turn around and I see my buddy. This is a guy that we went to the same high schools together, or similar, same town. We went through MEPS together. We lived in the same town basically, and he shows up in his brown Suzuki Samurai, and he's like, "Hey man, what's up?" And I was like, "Holy shit, Brian, what's going on?" And he goes, "Let's go." I'm like, "Where?" He says, "Let's go to Myrtle Beach." And I remember as a Marine just coming back from Desert Storm, being in Myrtle Beach, and I walked into bars and Brian would go, "He just got back from Desert Storm. He was in Recon." And I drank, and I mean, it was just a different time back then. There was so much patriotism, and Desert Storm and yellow ribbons everywhere. And I wound up like hooking up every night I was down there. Girls were just throwing themselves. You were in Desert Storm? Come on, let's go. And I'm like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
And 7 days later, I out-processed out of the Marine Corps. No, nothing. Like now, Marines, sailors, Army, everybody, they get out. They have like medical, dental, PTSD. I mean, everything in the world. They have classes on transition, TAP class, this, that. It's like, here's your DD-214. You throw your boots over the high-tension wires, drive over the bridge at Onslow Beach, and you're done.
Right. And so you drive over the bridge of Onslow Beach, and where do you find yourself?
I had made a plan. I'm going to college.
Okay.
And I drive back to New Jersey. Brian's in New Jersey. He's out of the Marine Corps. I'm out of the Marine Corps. And we lifeguard all summer. But it's like the first week of lifeguarding together on the Jersey Shore. And we're in a bar called Frankie's Bar and Grill in New Jersey, and we're drinking. And I've never liked drinking, but when I got back from Desert Storm, I drank a lot. Not like alcoholic, but I did drink. Not because I was trying to erase my, memories or dealing with trauma. It's just, it was fun. I was 22, just out of combat, and I drank, to have fun. But we're sitting in the bar, and Brian says to me, what are we going to do? And we're like getting to this drunk philosophical discussion. And as typical, ex-Marines and, young guys, we decided we're going to flip a coin. Heads, we go to college. Tails, we go to stuntman school. Literally, that was the choice. And I was happy either way. Flip the coin, heads. We're going to college. So we start filling out paperwork and admissions and this and that. And Brian wasn't as smart. I don't want to say as smart. Brian's an intelligent guy, but he didn't do well in school. I didn't do that well, but I was a little better than him. So we both wind up choosing, we both had like 5 or 6 schools that we both got accepted to. It was like Slippery Rock, IUP, Rutgers, this and that. So being the good intel officer I am, I did my due diligence. I went to Playboy's top 100 party schools, saw that IUP was ranked number 9 or 10 in the nation.
Right.
And they had a woman to man ratio of 6-1. No brainer.
Right.
There we go. IUP.
All right. So I mean, absolutely. That's you have it locked on. Target rich environment.
Exactly.
So you go to college. Have you started thinking about going back in the military at this point?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I have no desire to go back in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
Or out of the military at all. Junior year, Brian comes up to me. Hey, Jim, I got a great idea. I'm like, what? Let's go to officer candidate school. We're going to be pilots. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah. I'm talking to the officer candidate, the officer candidate school guy here. Let's go do it. I'm like, all right, fine, let's do it. I don't want to leave him. I want to do it with him. We go to college together. We're going to go to OCS together. Go through all of the paperwork drill. I get accepted in the program. He doesn't. I'm like, how did that happen? So a couple of weeks later, I'm off to officer candidate school for the Marine Corps. And, here I am going to, and the funny story, before I go to officer candidate school, I'm bartending at a bar in New Jersey, loving life, lifeguarding, bartending, and now I have to go to officer candidate school for the Bulldog course, the PLC Junior Bulldog course in the summer. So Brian, in his infinite wisdom again, he's like, hey, Jim, it was the night before I had to go to OCS. And he's like, hey, Jim, can you help me out? I need some help with this. And I'm like, Brian, I got to pack. I haven't packed yet. He's like, no, just come to Frankie's and just meet me here. I just got to do a couple things. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. That's okay. I go there. They're having a go-away party for me. And I do not get home until 4 or 5 in the morning. Some girl drops me off at the house. I don't know where my car is. I don't know where my keys are. I'm living with my grandparents. I haven't packed. My grandma was like, Jim, what are you doing? And I'm like, Graham, just go to bed. So he picks me up with my car, and we're driving to Newark Airport so I can go to Officer Candidate School and fly down to Quantico, Virginia. Literally threw up on the side of the car. Get to the airport. I'm hungover. I get to OCS, and I just am like, I have been through Marine Corps boot camp. I've been in the Marines for almost 5 years.
Right.
I don't want any part of this. Drill instructors yelling at me, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm just tired. And go grab your sea bag, run over here, run over there, do this, do that. And probably one of the funniest things that ever happened to me in boot camp, and I've done some really fun stuff. We all get in our in our squad bay. And they're like, the drill instructor's all the way at the end of the squad bay, and he's just screwing with everybody. Grab your boots, come out to the ear, and you have to run back and forth and put them in your wall locker. And I'm like, F this. I pull the foot locker over, I sit on it, and I'm just hungover, and I'm taking grab 4 skivvies. I'm just holding them up and throwing them. And the guys next to me are like, what are you doing? Don't do that. Get up. And I'm like, shut up. I've been through this before. I was an honor grad at a boot camp. I didn't know, but the squad bay at the end, there was a door. And these drill instructors are going up and down the passageway, the ladder well. And they looked in and they saw me. And literally they told me after graduation, we watched you for about 15 minutes. They were laughing their asses off. Like, who is this guy? They kick the door in and they come screaming, I have 8 drill instructors screaming at me, and I just lock in position of attention, they're all yelling at me, and I'm like, hungover. That's day 1 of OCS. Now, fast forward, I wind up graduating and winning the Commandant's Trophy as a junior. Top national graduate out of Officer Candidate School for the Marine Corps. And had the highest grade point average ever, had an obstacle course time record, and just was, I was based upon my time, prior service, Desert Storm, it was just easy for me.
Right. So when you graduate this, are you commissioned as a Marine Corps officer, as a naval officer? How does that work?
So I was just juniors.
Okay.
You have to go back for seniors. And when you graduate seniors, you take your commission and then you go to TBS.
Okay.
But funny story, I go back the next year for seniors. And this time I don't get drunk and hungover, and I go down there and I'm going to take it serious. And because now you won the Commandant's Trophy. And when I was enlisted, I was on a poster for the Marine Corps, a recruiting poster. So I'm like, hey, Jim, take your career serious, because I won the trophy, and at my university, they gave me a trophy, and they presented the university with the award too, and a 2-star general came down, and it kind of made me think, hey, I'm going back in, I'm going to be an officer, I'm going to be a pilot, maybe I should not be a shithead anymore.
Right.
And so I go back for seniors, and it's the first weekend we have Liberty. And I go out to Q-Town, and then I go out to Quantico, and I'm drinking and having fun, smoking cigarettes, being Jim. Wound up hooking up with this girl. And she's like, hey, come on with me. And I'm like, okay. So wound up hooking up in the back of her car. And she drives me next morning or early in the morning back to the base. And I get on the base, and, I'm like, see you later. Thanks. So I'm getting ready for inspection on Sunday, and I can't find my ID card. And I'm like, I have to put it in my left breast pocket, and I can't find it. I can't find my wallet. I'm like, oh, shit. And I go through formation, and all of a sudden I hear on the loudspeaker, Officer Candidate Sisco, report to the drill instructor's office immediately. And I'm like, oh, no, what's going on? So I go run down there, bang, bang, bang. Officer Sisco reporting his orders, sir. And they're like, get in here, pig. And I'm locked up, and they start asking me all these questions, where were you this weekend? What'd you do? Da, 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 da. And I'm like, whatever. And they're like, did you do anything? Did you meet with a girl? Did you do anything inappropriate? And I'm like, now I'm starting to get back to myself. I'm like, I don't know. What do you consider inappropriate? Yeah. And they're like, lock it up. So finally, one of the senior drill instructors goes, who's the 8th person in your chain of command? And I'm like, I don't know, who knows what they're.
Yeah.
He's like, how about General Cox? And I'm like, okay, great. He goes, do you know the girl's name you were with last night? And I'm like, I think it was Stephanie or something. He's like, how about Stephanie Cox? The general opened the door for the grandmother to let her in the car to go to church and saw my wallet. Opened up my wallet, saw the officer candidate sticker on the ID card. Next morning at 04:30, he's standing in the chow hall line. I come out of the left face. There he is, this short little guy, and he goes, Officer Candidate Sisco, I'd advise you to be a little more careful what you do on liberty. Understand me? And he takes my wallet and throws it in the eggs. And I go, yes, sir, and turn, and I'm out. Anyway, I didn't win the Commandant's Trophy again. I got a bad grade for leadership, showing poor judgment. But now I'm off. I'm going to be an officer. I'm going to TBS. Put the brakes on. What's going on? Well, you need to get another eye exam. It's been 2 years since you got one, and you need to get one. Oh, I'm like, okay. I go get an eye exam. It's not 2020. Well, you can't be a pilot. It's not 2020. And I'm like, what do you mean? So I go take another eye test. Comes out 2020. Then they're saying, well, you might have got refractive surgery, so you got to go get this procedure done to make sure you get it. Now, I'm 26. I'm getting on the borderline of having to get a waiver.
Right.
And they're like, oh, well, we're not going to give you your flight contract, but you can go back and be a ground or whatever. And I'm like, no, that's not what I signed up for.
Right.
I'm walking out of the officer, the Marine Corps recruiting station office, and Navy guy looks at me. He's like, hey, come on in. And I'm like, okay. Now, there you got it. I am now off to Officer Candidate School in Pensacola, Florida, with Marine Corps drill instructors who find out that I am this former golden child, poster boy, honor grad out of boot camp, Commandant's Trophy winner. Now I'm in the Navy.
Right.
Didn't go well.
So how does it go?
So here's how it goes. I am in a room with a SEAL, a former SEAL. Well, he's a SEAL. He was going to be an officer.
Yeah.
A swimmer who went to Stanford University, who missed the Olympics by like 0.2 of a second. Me and a flight contract whose father was a 3-star admiral.
Uh-huh.
I am sitting there chewing tobacco, spitting in my Dorgit clan, Dorglit, that shiny stuff for brass. And the officer candidates would come on into our room, and they'd be like, attention on deck. And we'd be like, get out of here before we kill you. I remember we would go to McDonald's in my car through the drive-thru and bring McDonald's back into the barracks, eating McDonald's. The whole place would stink of McDonald's.
Yeah.
And everybody's, dying for food.
Yeah.
One time, the SEAL and I, we went down to the drill instructor's quarters. Hey, sir, we didn't get enough workout PT in. Can you let us go to the gym? They're like, oh, come here, pigs.
Yeah.
So OCS was fun for me. And the funniest thing I ever did, and I went during Christmas, so I got to drive home and go for Christmas and then come back. And I brought my Marine Corps uniform with me, and I had a plan. So one night, I sneaked down into the drill instructor's shack, and I take one of their Smokies, and I take one of their belts. I dress in my camis, and then after lights out, I change, and all of a sudden, I just turn on the lights in the barracks, start kicking cans, screaming, get out! And I just torture everybody for about 25 to 30 minutes. I have mattresses out. I have people crying. They think I'm a drill instructor who came in the middle of the night just to screw with them. I get 2 foot lockers and stack them up at the end of the squad bay. And I'm like, get out of here, get online. And they're like, because I'm in the Marines, I was in the Marines. I know how to do this stuff. And they're all standing in the position of attention. I have my head down like a drill instructor. And I go, Merry Christmas. And they're like, holy shit, it's Officer Candidate Sisco. So that was like the funnest thing for me. I remember that. And then I get done with officer candidate school, and now I'm on my way to being a intelligence officer. Excited about it. And I go to Dam Neck, Virginia, Little Creek, and I'm waiting to get picked up for my intel class. And they're so backed up at that point, I have 8 months.
Wow.
And 8 months. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do? Just drink and hang out for 8 months? You know? And they're like, we got to bill it for you. You're going to a SEAL team. I'm like, cool. I'm like, great. That is awesome. I'm going to go, get to do this shit that I know how to do. And I had fun doing it.
Yeah.
So I'm in Little Creek, and I go over to the SEAL team, and Commander Bozichevsky is waiting for me. This guy's like got a great history, well respected in the community. And he's like, hey, come on in, Jim. Sit down. And I'm like, hey, sir. He's like, what's up with you? And I'm like, well, I'm at Dam Neck, and I'm going through, intel school, but we got backed up, so he sent me over here. I'm going to, be assigned here for the next 8 months, 7 months. He's like, great, what's your background? We start talking. He finds out I was in the Marines. I was in Desert Storm, did deployments, views, jump school, all this shit. So he's like, all right, just head down to the intel shop, go to supply, check in, get your gear, and, have at it. Have fun. I'm like, okay. And I remember checking in, and I was only down there the first week, and I remember, and this kind of started my disdain for SEALs. Very arrogant, very just anyway, not all of them, but a majority. And I'm sitting down there in my PT gear, as an ensign. Guys would come down and like, hey, who's the new guy? I was like, oh, that's the new ensign. He's an intel guy. And they're like, oh, another booger eater. Great. And I'd be like, okay, So then they start testing me. Hey, sir, we're going to go on a run tomorrow. You want to come? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that'd be cool. Like, it's 10 miler. You up for it? And I'm like, yeah, I think I can do it. I was in OCS and we ran 5 miles, And they're like, so we get to the end of the 10-mile run, and I'm like, I came in second or third, and I'm
right.
clapping them in. Yeah, good job. Come on, push it. That last 100 yards, you can do it. They're like, who the hell is this guy? So a week later, they're like, hey, sir, we're doing an 1 mile open water swim tomorrow. You in? And I'm like, I don't know, guys. I'm not a strong swimmer, but I'll try. We get done with the swim, and same thing. I came in third, or and I'm clapping them in. Hey, you can do it. They're like, this guy's weird. What's going on? So the final one, they're like, hey, sir, we're going to the rifle range. I'm like, oh, cool. I shot a 9mm in OCS. I really like it, And they're like, okay. So they take me to the rifle range, and they're like, this is the Sig Sauer, this is the MP5, this is the, and I'm like, oh, this one looks cool. Can I try this one? They don't know that, I've done all this stuff and was doing training for HRT and direct action, was in the hot house in Bragg.
Yeah.
And I don't tell them anything. And they're like, well, sir, this is your sight alignment, and this is your sight picture, and this is how you do trigger squeeze, and and I'm just sitting there, oh, well, that's really cool. So they come over, they send me off with them, go shoot underarm for a little while. I'm like, okay. And they come over and they're like, hey, how you doing, sir? And I'm like, I had my target, on the bench, and I'm like, I didn't do good, guys. I'm like, I'm sorry. And they're like, what? What's the matter? And I'm like, I tried that stuff you were telling me about, this trigger squeeze, and I had the sight picture and the sight alignment, and I don't know. I just don't know what happened. And they're like, well, let me see your target. And I had them all in the black except for 2 outliers and one screamer, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Sorry to disappoint you. I didn't get them all in the black. And they're looking at me are you insane?
Yeah.
And so we have this. Well, they have a SEAL team tradition, when they bring a new person on. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but at the all hands meeting, they're like, "Yay, come on up, and we're going to welcome Ensign Sisco. Let's give Ensign Sisco a big SEAL team welcome." And we have similar traditions in Recon, so I know what's going to happen. But the commander's like, "Hey, before you guys give a big SEAL team welcome to Ensign Sisco, let me give you a little background. And now he starts telling everybody. Ensign Sisco was in the Marine Corps. He was in Recon. He was in Desert Storm. He deployed here. He did this.
Yeah.
And I just watch them all looking at me like, are you kidding me? And I know what's going to happen. So he goes, hey, go ahead, Ensign Sisco. Go ahead and tell us a little about yourself. And I know the minute you open your mouth, everybody starts screaming, shut up, asshole, sit down, fuck you, you know. So I just preempt it. He goes, go ahead and tell us a little about yourself. And I go, so I bend her over and I'm fucking her in the ass. And and everybody just gets quiet. And they're like, oh my God. And I go, if you want to talk about this offline, come see me later on. And everybody just starts laughing and cheering.
Yeah.
So, you know, that kind of like was my introduction to the SEAL team, which kind of the fun 8 months. But towards the end, the commander came up to me and said, hey, Jim, you would be an incredible officer in SEAL. I want you to go to BUDS. And I said, sir, I am too old. I'm not too old physically. I just was too old, mature. I said, I won't do this. I would love to just be a SEAL officer, but I don't want to go through BUDS.
Yeah.
Not because I can't go through it.
Right.
I'm 56 years old right now, and I'll bet you $1 million that I would pass BUDS.
Yeah.
Because it's more mental than physical. But I said, I couldn't have some senior chief coming up to me going, hey, Ensign, your boat team's dead. What are you going to do? And I would probably look at him and go, well, fuck it. It's time to go to the officer club. You want to join me? Oh, wait, you can't. So forget about it. You know?
Yeah.
It was all attitude. But,
let me ask you that. When you were working in the two shop there, I mean, that must have been a good learning experience for you, right?
Yes and no. And the reason I say this, and this is actually a mirror of my career as an intelligence officer, I was an intel guy, but I had the special operations stink on me.
Uh-huh.
So believe it or not, even as an ensign in the SEAL teams, I was an advisor on operational readiness exercises. I was going out on operations. I was like parachuting in with them. And, you know, so yes, I got some introduction to intel, but I was still being an operator in a way. So It was really weird.
Right. So you go through that, and then you get into the intel school. And how long is that intel school for a naval intel officer?
It's months. I forget. It was like 5 months, 6 months. I mean, It was grueling and it was terrible. We were still learning, like, this is a Badger, this is the Foxtrot, the pictures, recce of planes and tanks. I mean, not sophisticated like today. And it was just, I mean, but that was the era. It was totally different.
Right.
And it didn't prepare you for anything, to be honest with you.
Right.
You just went to either your squadron or your ship or wherever, and you were just ate up like a soup sandwich, and you just got buried.
Yeah.
And that was just the way. That was the intel community back then.
Yeah. So what was your first assignment out of the intel officer course then?
For me, I was very fortunate because I was prior service, and they sent me down to JWAC, Joint Warfare Analysis Center, Dahlgren, Virginia. And I was part of a high-speed organization that did infrastructure targeting and really some cool stuff, modeling and simulation. And I was there for 3 years. And I was able to get right into SAT programs. And so my whole ensign tour was totally different. Like most ensigns are on a ship or in a squadron, and they're just trying to live.
Right.
And I'm learning all this cool stuff and writing the programs and briefing the commanding officer of JWAC on the Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar division in Iraq and how they're moving. And I'll never forget this. I'm giving a presentation, and I'm talking about all this complex maneuvering. And the CO, Heater Heatley, who was in Top Gun did a cameo in Top Gun. Arrogant guy. And he's like looking at the brief, and he's looking at the slides, and I'm like, man, he's digging it. He's like really into it, you know? I'm waiting for these great questions. And he goes, Ensign Sisco, is that the JWAC format for those slides? And I literally looked at him. I looked at the J2. I put down my little briefing thing and goes, and that concludes my portion of the brief. Thank you very much. And I walked out. And I still had 6 slides to go. People were like, who the fuck is this ensign? Who the hell does he think he is? I went back to my cubicle and I started working.
Yeah.
J2's up my ass. Everybody's screaming, where did you go? You don't just walk out in the CO. You need to go see the CO immediately. I'm like, okay. I walk in the CO's office. He's like, what was that about? And I said, sir, if you're more interested in the font than what I'm saying, you're wasting my time. I don't want to waste yours. And he's like, okay. So once again, you see this pattern of my behavior, and I just wasn't a typical mold for an intel guy.
Yeah.
You want that booger eater, sits in the cube, pounding away at the keyboard. And people join Naval Intelligence because they think it's like Jack Ryan in The Hunt for Red October. And they have no idea that it's not like that at all.
Right. Right. So after your, how long did you said you spent 3 years there?
3 years. And
Okay.
after that, I have to do the typical career progression. So they send me out to Fallon, Nevada. And that is when there's top guns out there. And I'm going to be a targeteer. It's one of the best positions for a junior officer, naval intelligence officer, being a targeteer. Fast track, career promotion, all the cool people do it. And I go through targeting school at Fallon. I get assigned to Carrier Air Wing 7. And I think it's a really cool mission. And, and I'm ready to do this. And everything in the intel community is personality driven, the KGIs, everybody. And 9/11 kicks off. We are off Virginia Beach on the USS John F. Kennedy. I remember watching on the news the airplanes crash into the tower. I'm in charge of my strike bay, and I don't really know what to do. I'm like, turn the TVs off. Just turn them off. Let's get to work. We're going to be doing something. I don't know what it is, but we can't be distracted. And like an hour later, we're cruising. We're doing air packs. F-18s, F-14s are launched with Stinger missiles, air-to-air missiles, and we're doing depth packs. Anything that flies in unresponsive, we're shooting down.
Right.
Next thing you know, I am off. I'm doing all the targeting stuff, and we pull back in, and I'm ADVON, and I'm leaving to go to CENTCOM, 5th Fleet, as the targeting officer for the Carrier Air Wing 7 advanced party before the ship gets there.
Okay. And so where do you go to from there to ADVON to get out there?
They just flew me out there, but I have a really funny story. I gotta tell this one.
Yeah.
I am with these 2 sailors who are in the strike bay with me, and we're in Virginia Beach, and we're flying out of Oceana on a MAC flight the next day. And they're like, hey, sir, what do you want to do? I'm like, come with me. They're like, what are we doing? I'm like, we're going to the O Club. They're like, sir, we can't go in the O Club. I'm like, just go with me. Shut your mouth. You're with me. Don't worry about it. And I was a lieutenant at the time. So now I'm a little more seasoned. And we walk in the O Club, and I'm sitting down at the bar. And I know the bartender from my time at the SEAL team, and she knows me. And she knew about, how I was when I was at the teams. Just party guy, fun, getting fights. Different world back then.
Yeah.
And when I was in intel school, the first day of intel school, I get pulled out of class. And one of the instructors was like, hey, we're going to have to roll you. Remember, I was 7 months at the teams, and now I'm in the first day of class. I'm like, what? What do you mean roll me? They're like, there's a complaint for EEO against you, or somebody in the class meeting. And I'm like, what? The night before, we went out, and one of the females in the class were all drinking, and she's like, Sisco, why are you always partying? And I'm like, shut up, Mary. You're just jealous because you're fat and I won't hook up with you. So she made this complaint. So the instructor comes out, and he's like, hey, we're going to have to roll you. I'm like, no. And he's like, well, sorry. And I'm like, no, I'm walking down to the CO's office right now. I'm not, no way. And he's like, no, don't go down there. I'm like, well, what's going on? Was it Fat Mary? Was it Fat Mary? She said something, didn't she? He's like, stop it. And I'm like, bring her out here. Get Fat Mary out here. So anyway, he gets her out. And I'm like, Mary, did you say I was an asshole last night? And did you say it, this and that? She goes, yeah, you are. And I go, I have a witness. I want to press EO charge. Right?
Yeah.
He's like, okay, that's it. Just get inside. And I'm like, haha. So here I am at the Oceano Club. I'm 3 or 4 Jack and Waters and about a half a pack of Marlboro Reds into my night. The 2 enlisted guys are on both sides of me. And I get this tap on the shoulder. Tap, tap, tap. And I turn my head, and it's Mary Gwen. Iceberg was her nickname, or call sign, because she had a big ass and nothing up top. And I remember looking over at her. I took a drag of my cigarette. I blew the smoke in her face, and she goes, hey, Sisco. And I went, Mary Gwen? And she goes, are you still in Intel? I take a drink of my Jack, take another drag of my cigarette, look at her, blow smoke in her face, and go, yep. She goes, I did a lat transfer. I'm an F-14 Rio. You're still fat. I was like, and the 2 guys next to me are like, what the hell? She goes running away. And 2 minutes later, there's about 15 pilots in their flight suits standing behind me. And I hear, is that the guy? And I just turn around and look. And he goes, did you call my wife fat? And I go, is Mary Gwen your wife? And he goes, yeah. I go, yeah. And he goes, I'm going to kick your ass. And so the bartender's like, yo, whoa, wait a minute. The enlisted guys are like, hell yeah, game on. We're going to fight officers. And the bartender's like, hey, guys, I hate to ruin your night. And she's talking to the pilots. He goes, you go outside with that guy, he's going to destroy you. And he's like, we got 8 of us. And she goes, I don't care if you have 10. I would recommend you leave. And he kind of wants to save face. He's like, well, you need to apologize. And I go, get the fuck away from me. Next day, we fly out. So I get out to CENTCOM, and I start integrating into the targeting thing. The ship comes out, and we start running 24/7 ops, and I'm doing all the targeting for Operation Anaconda. And I'm working with Task Force Dagger, Task Force Stiletto, doing all the targeting. We're trying to prosecute targets and kill Osama bin Laden. And we do this for, like 4 months straight. And take
So
break
can you tell us what the targeting process is for you guys?
Yeah. So here's what happens. Task Force Stiletto and Task Force Dagger are on the ground. That's the CIA and ODA teams. So they have eyes on, and they're trying to PID, identify high-value targets. Once they get PID on these high-value targets, our planes launch from the aircraft carrier, and they're up in the stack. Mm-hmm. They're just flying around in circles. They're armed with either JDAMs or whatever the munitions are for the different missions. And once they get PID, Task Force Dagger and Stiletto will come back to me. I'm like, hey, we got this. And then I relay the message, and everything goes back to 5th Fleet, to CENTCOM, to the National Director of Security to make a decision.
Right.
So imagine being the targeting officer. You're at the tip of the spear, and you're like day in and day out just getting your balls busted because they'll PID something on the ground. And by the time it goes all the way up to, a national security level and then gets back down, target's gone.
Right, right.
So, for me, that was probably the most frustrating time in my career.
Yeah.
I used to be that guy on the ground and love being the guy on the ground. And now here I am being the targeting guy to support them.
Yeah.
And can't do it.
Right. That's got to be very frustrating. So how long was your first pop like that?
That was a 10-month deployment.
Okay. And so you were doing targeting that time, and then, and we all, like, everybody expected it would be quick, but it turns out that it's not going to be quick. What happens after that deployment for you?
So after that deployment, I leave the air wing. And it wasn't like a good departure, because of what the crews and I got put in for a Bronze Star as a lieutenant for the targeting stuff I was doing, and the Army put me in for it. Imagine being a Navy guy. The Army puts me in for a Bronze Star, and my leadership says, we're going to demote it to an ARCOM because you're just a lieutenant.
Right.
And that was the first time of 3 in my career that they downgraded a Bronze Star for me.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of pissed off at the command. It didn't go well. Didn't like leadership. My mom has cancer, terminal cancer, and I'm on the ship. And the CAG AI, a lieutenant commander, comes up to me. He's like, "Hey Jim, we got an AMCROSS, and we just want to let you know your mom has terminal cancer, and you can leave cruise right now if you want to. We'll fly you off." And I'm like, "Yeah, no shit. I know she has terminal cancer. You think I don't talk to her?"
Yeah.
And he's, "Well, I just want to let you know, if you want to leave early, you can leave. But if you leave early, you're not going to get tax-free." And I'm like, "What?" My mom's dying. He's worried about me getting tax-free.
Right.
So I was livid.
Yeah.
I wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
I was literally looking for him on the ship. I was going to throw him off the ship or kill him. Anyway, I didn't leave early. I stayed on the entire cruise, the rest of the cruise. I got home, went back to Fallon, Nevada, drove all the way to Pennsylvania. I was just drinking Mountain Dews, chewing tobacco, smoking cigarettes, drove straight through. Got home, spent 20 days with my mom. And everybody's like, she's going to die any second. And when she found out I was coming home, and when I saw her, everybody's like, she changed overnight. She was like, physically, she could walk, she was doing stuff. And I felt great. Spent 20-something days with her and drove home, or back to Fallon. Got home and was playing golf on a Sunday. I was only home for 2 days. And my sister calls me up. "Mommy's dead." I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And for me, it was another kind of like point in my life I had to deal with tragedy or death or whatever. Trauma. Right. I don't call it trauma. That's just life.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate to have that time with my mom.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. But that was, for me, a difficult time in my life. Terrible deployment. I mean, great deployment for what I was doing. Terrible leadership,
Right.
And then dealing with that. But then it's time for a new start. I'm going to go get smart. I'm going to get my master's degree. So I go to Washington, D.C. I go to Joint Military Intelligence College, and I wind up getting my master's degree in science and strategic intelligence. And it's for the first time in my life, I really understand that I am smart. I am intelligent. Remember, I'm supposed to go into the union and get a union book and work on the back of a garbage truck and join the Marines, enlisted. I go to college and I do really well in college, but still have that stigma. Like, I'm not that smart, not that intelligent. Go get my master's degree, and I am partying still. I'm going out. I'm dating a Redskins cheerleader. I'm going on vacations and just partying. And it's like about a month before graduation, and one of my good friends, Air Force Major, comes up to me and he goes, "I hate you." I'm like, "What do you mean you hate me?" He goes, "Have you looked at your grade point average?" And I go, "No, should I?" And he goes, "You are 1/10 of a percentage point below me for class valedictorian." I'm like, "Really? I wasn't even trying." And he goes, "I know. I go to study sessions, I do all this stuff, and you're out partying." And it was at that point I kind of looked at my career and said, wow, I'm kind of screwing up. I'm having fun and I'm partying and I'm like doing all this stuff, but I didn't take my career seriously.
Right.
I think it was at that point I decided, hey, maybe I should start taking my career seriously. So I have an opportunity. I have an opportunity to deploy to Afghanistan, and I'm going to take this opportunity. It's going to be a change for me in my career, and best or second best tour of my life. I train up and I go to Afghanistan. Don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to be a naval intelligence officer and I'm going to Afghanistan. And I get there and it's all Army and it's all jacked up. And, the Navy guy comes in with a different uniform, brown uniform. And they put me in the FRIC, the force, or no, I forget the acronym. But anyway, it was the JAKE, the Joint Intel Analysis Center, or some shit like that. So I'm in the JAKE, and they don't really have a job for me. I have this Army colonel, really great guy, and then this lieutenant colonel, another great guy. Great people there. And they're like, well, we don't really know what to do with you. But Colonel Chesney, he runs all of President Karzai's engagement tours. You have a background in the Marines and Special Forces. Go talk to him. I'm like, okay. So I go in and introduce myself. He's like, you're my man. I needed an assistant for a while. We didn't have a billet. You're now my deputy. I'm like, cool. 3 weeks later, I am on a plane with President Karzai on the way to Kandahar. And I am working with the colonel and doing all of the logistics, all of the security, working with the Presidential Protective Service, working with National Director of Security, NDS, and just having the time of my life. I get split up from the group. I'm sitting in the Shura with about 500 Afghans. I'm the only American because I got split up from the group, sitting at this huge table. I don't speak Dari. Nobody speaks English. And I'm just sitting there, and they have Afghans all around me. Mm-hmm. And they start bringing out plates of food and naan and oranges and all of this Afghan food. And all of a sudden, they put this goat's leg right in front of me. Still got the hoof on it.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell is this? And the guy next to me is like, And I'm like, he's like, eat. And I'm like, I don't know how. So he takes the piece of bread and he rips it off the naan, and he takes the rice and they put it in their hand and they eat it, and then he just shoves his hand right in the goat's leg and rips out a piece of meat, puts it in the bread and eats it. So I'm like, oh my God. So I just do the same thing he does. I'm over dramatic about it, ripping the bread, and everybody's watching me and they're all laughing. The rice is all over me, and that was my first introduction to Afghan culture. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, I did three tours in Afghanistan, 911, that was really targeting, but I spent almost 2 years in Afghanistan, and I love the culture. I love the people. I just fell in love with Afghanistan. But here I was, a lieutenant in the Navy as the deputy for a colonel, Army colonel, and I'm running all of President Karzai's engagement tours. And I remember I'm in the JAKE, whatever it was, and there's a call to the colonel had gotten emergency orders to go to ICAF. He just 2 days later, he's gone. And all of a sudden there's a call to the JAKE, and the lieutenant colonel picks up the phone and he's like, hey man, President Karzai's got a trip to Badakhshan. Where's the colonel? And he went to ICAF. Go over to the palace. I'm like, okay. So I know the chief of staff. I know the chief of protocol. I've done I know Engineer Nabil, who's the head of the PPS. And here I am. And they're like, okay, well, you got to plan the mission. You got to go do this. And I'm like, okay. So I just did it.
Yeah.
It was easy.
Yeah.
Next thing I know, I'm in Badakhshan, which is in the northern part of Afghanistan in the winter. And I'm with the ADVON team and the security team. And it's me, the Department of State guy, and about a dozen Afghans, PPS. And when you go to Afghanistan, you go through the cultural training. Don't look at women. Don't touch this. Don't do that. Don't cross your legs. Typical bullshit. And I remember we're going through the village, and I hate the cold. Remember, I told you, hate the cold.
Mm-hmm.
I got my hat on, my scarf on, I'm like Gore-Texed up, and blah. And I see this girl come out of one of the little huts, and she literally has on a wool dress and no shoes, and she's running in the snow. And I'm like, whoa, I'm freezing. And she kind of stops and looks at me, because it was funny, because here's this white guy with all these Afghans, you know, she's probably never seen an American before. And she stops. And I literally just walk up to her and pick her up, and kind of like, she's about like 5 or 6 years old, and I have her like this. And I take my hat off and I put it on her head, and I take my scarf off and I put it around her neck, and I just put her down.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes running away, like tears out, turns around like 10, 15 feet away, looks at me, smiles at me, waves, and I wave and smile back. And, you know, I felt good at that moment.
Yeah.
Felt like I did something. You know, I was happy. I was content. There was peace in my life. And I turned around, and I have a half dozen, or, you know, a dozen Afghans giving me the Afghan stink eye. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I had my M4 across my shoulder, and I just brought it down, and I looked at him, and had my finger out, like, I'm trigger well. I go, you got a problem with that? Anybody got a problem with that? And they're like, oh, no, it's all good. It's good. Yeah. I'm like, okay, good. What happened was, I get back on the plane, Advan's done, and this story gets told, but it gets distorted, and it makes it all the way up to President Karzai. That some American grabbed an Afghan girl, touched her. You know, whatever touch means, you know, nothing perverted. And I get called into the chief of staff's office. Chief of protocol wants to talk to me. Fortunately, the chief of protocol is a good guy. He went to Rutgers University. I'm from New Jersey. We're tight. He said, what the hell happened out there? Anyway, finally makes it all the way up to President Karzai. I go meet with him, and I tell him what happened. I'm like, and I'm not your typical 06. I'm just an 03.
Right.
I don't know how to interact with a president.
Right.
I'm not like, Mr. President, sir, I didn't. I'm like, hey, sir, this is what happened. That's total bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm like, I would never. And so he loves me. He loves me because I'm genuine. I'm authentic.
Right.
I'm not a stuffy, you know, officer who's kissing ass and trying to worry about his career. I leave the palace, and everything's cool. I come back the next day, and everybody's looking at me when I'm walking around the palace. Like, really weird. And then I go to the PPS, and everybody's like looking at me weird. And my buddy, Azraf was, him and I were tight over there. He comes up to me, and he gives me a kiss on the cheek and a kiss on the other cheek, and he says, my Zoe. From that time on, President Karzai said to everybody that this is a brother of Afghanistan. He is my son. So I had like the respect of everybody, and I could do no wrong, which was a good thing, but was also a bad thing because it gave me way too much authority.
Yeah.
So I never abused that authority, but it was really weird, you know, understanding the culture, but it just got thrown into it. I would walk around the palace, and the PPS agents would hold my hand. They would kiss me. They would try to take me to Chicken Street, where all the prostitutes were. They would want me to go out with them on Thursday night, where, you know, and they would have sex with each other.
Yeah.
And I was a brother, and I didn't do a lot of the things, and they respected me because I chose not to do it. And I told them I wouldn't do it, but I let them do it. But I had their respect, and I loved that tour until the end. I don't know if everybody knows, but General Eikenberry was the ISAF commander at the time. And I don't particularly care for General Eikenberry. And people will have comments. I'll refrain from giving you my opinion on him. But I'm walking out of the palace. Now, I am the only American to ever be issued a palace badge. I can come and go as I please. And General Eikenberry is outside the palace with like his 30-man PTSD team and 2 up-armored SUVs and Escalades, and he sees me, and I'm in this brown uniform with my brown cover and my binder that I have from all my trips, and he sees me, and he goes, "Who are you?" and I see him, and I'm like, "Fuck, I can't get out of this one." Mm-hmm. And I just walk up to him and I go, "Good morning, sir. I'm Lieutenant Sisco. Who are you?" And I did it kind of like sarcastically, and I didn't really think that I said that when it came out. And then I was like, "Oh, that came out." And he goes, "I'm General Eikenberry." And I go, "Well, nice to meet you, sir." And he like is still dumbfounded. He's like, he shakes my hand. And I'm like, "It was very nice to meet you, sir. I got to go." And I just turn around and start walking away. And he's like, "Stop. Where are you going?" And I go, "I have a meeting with the chief of protocol and chief of staff. I got to go. I'm going to be late, sir. Nice meeting you." And I just walk in the palace. I get back to the Jake about 3 hours later. And they're like, "What the fuck did you do?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "There is an all points bulletin on Camp Edgar's looking for a Navy lieutenant in his brown uniform who was at the palace. You need to go see General Eikenberry right now." I'm like, "All right, whatever." I go in and I'm like, "Hey, sir, Lieutenant Sisco." He's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm telling him, sir, I've been running President Karzai's regional engagement tours for 7 months." And he's like, "How come I didn't know about that?" I go, "I don't know, sir. After every trip, I write a after action report and send it to you. I guess you never read it." And he's like, the next day I have an Army colonel assigned to the Jake. He takes over for me. Biggest D-bag you ever met in your life. If President Karzai stopped short, he'd be 4 feet up his ass. Every picture, every engagement, every time he's out in the spotlight. And I'm like, "Sir, this is not our job. This is the Afghans. We're behind the scenes.
Right.
Don't try." And so we were like this. Anyway, I get done with that tour. President Karzai writes me a letter to be one of the next White House fellows. So think about this. I apply to be a White House fellow. My career trajectory is just off the charts. And lo and behold, the Navy has a certain way of screwing things up. I'm engaged. I have a fiance. She's a nut job, but she's smoking hot. And trying to break up with her, she keys my Corvette. I had a 62 Corvette, a BMW. I mean, I'm living in Old Town Alexandria. She goes psycho, keys the car. I have to call the police. She calls my command and writes a letter. And I'm telling my command, what's up with this? She winds up saying that I was physically abusive, that I had suffered from PTSD and war trauma. And she did all this just to sabotage the White House fellowship, bust my balls. Meanwhile, she's in court, has to pay me $10,000, has to fix my cars, won't give back the engagement ring. And I'm like, oh my God. So career path takes a little hiccup.
Right.
And anyway, I decide that I'm going to go back to Afghanistan. They have this program called the AFPAC Hands Program. Sounds wonderful. I learn how to speak Dari. I go to language school, and it's going to be awesome. I'm going to go back. But in the interim, I'm working at the Navy Irregular Warfare Office, and I'm writing doctrine on COIN, FID, because of my time in Afghanistan. I've become the subject matter expert for the Navy in counterinsurgency and foreign internal defense, and wind up going to Ethiopia and signing a directive for the ambassador with the national with the Ethiopian National Defense Force. As a lieutenant commander, I sign a treaty. The ambassador's like, "Yeah, Jim, you can go. Just go do it."
Yeah.
So I start, getting back to the career. Like, I'm digging in. And I start working more with JSOC and SOCOM on some special mission stuff, on the Super Tucano, on some Scan Eagle stuff, some really cool stuff. I wind up going to Balad. And this is the story that really changed my entire career. I'm in Balad, and that's the headquarters for SOCOM. And I know the J2, Captain Heimberger, and he's kind of a dick, but get along with him. Brent Heibinger, big guy. Anyway. And I go over there with my Admiral Kenny. We're talking about the special mission stuff, and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. They had just done a mission. They had rolled up some guy. They had killed 2 HVTs, and they come back, and McChrystal's there, Heimbigner's there, a bunch of 05s, a bunch of 06, my Admiral, me, Lieutenant Commander, and the J2 just started going, yes, sir, man, we kicked ass, it's typical, like, kiss-ass shit. And, we rolled up Baghdadi, and we did this, and we got that, and, I'm like, just watching. And McChrystal's like, taking it all in, he starts talking. And out of nowhere, I go, so how did this help? And everybody kind of looks at me. And my Admiral, he knew me. The coin fid guy, he's like, no, Jim, don't do it. He kind of grabs my arm. And McChrystal looks over at me and goes, what? And I go, and what did this accomplish, sir? And he looked at me. And I had rehearsed this. I said, in the past 6 months, we've rolled up 287 guys. We killed 314. We've done this. We've done 67 missions in here. We've done this. And I laid it all out for him. And I said, what did we get, sir, besides high op tempo, a bunch of dead bodies, and a bunch of people that are getting, interrogated? I'll tell you what we got, sir. We've got a pissed off Sunni population. We've got Shiites that are in arrest. We have all this stuff, and the population is against us.
Wait, you said Balad, this is Iraq or Afghanistan?
This is Afghanistan, or Iraq. I'm in Iraq.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And McChrystal just looks at me, and he goes, have I ever told you about the arc of instability? At 6 o'clock in the morning, 3 hours later, he was done explaining it to me, and he basically said, you are my hand select to be the J2. I am going to Afghanistan, and you're coming with me. Because I told him I'd worked for President Karzai and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. He goes, you go learn how to speak Dari. And that's when I went to language school.
Okay.
Yeah. And I get it. I'm a hand select to go to Afghanistan again for my 3rd tour. I'm going to be on McChrystal's staff. General Flynn's over there, and Flynn wants me to be the liaison for NDS, which is their CIA, as a lieutenant commander. I am ruffling feathers everywhere. But I'm a hand select, and I'm McChrystal's boy. And I am finishing language school, and they're like, go now. We're going to send you to immersion training. You are going to go live with Afghans in one of the stands. Mm-hmm. So I'm in immersion training. And I'm living in a house. All they speak is Dari. I'm eating Afghan food. It's cool as shit.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but I'm struggling to learn Dari. And anyway, I'm fly to Camp Eggers, I think, or I forget where I was flying to. And I get there, and that day the Rolling Stone article comes out. Boom. McChrystal's out of country. A couple weeks later, Petraeus rolls in. I'm in limbo. I'm sitting around with my thumb up my ass. I don't know what to do. Can't go to Flynn. He's leaving. Porter's coming in. All this stuff's happening. So I'm just like, well, wait till Petraeus comes in. How bad could it be? Petraeus comes in, and I schedule an in-call with him. Hey, sir, Lieutenant Commander Sisco, I'm just here to, introduce myself and find out where I'm going to sit on your CAG staff, or I'm scheduled to be the liaison for NDS, and really can't wait to get to work for you, sir. Got some great experience and insights that could help you out. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Commander. All right, what do you mean, sir? I got this. I have a CAG staff. I don't need you. I'm like, sir, I don't think you understand. I worked for President Karzai. I speak Dari. I know this country like the back of my hand. I've traveled everywhere. I know Taliban. I know ANA, AMP. I know all the commanders. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Commander Sisco. We'll find a spot for you. I said, hey, sir, I just want to let you know something. Not only did I do all this stuff, but I've also studied Iraq. And let me just tell you one thing. Don't think that your troop surge plan is going to work in Iraq the way it, or work in Afghanistan the way it did in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gonna. And oh, by the way, your troop surge isn't the reason why we won in Iraq. It was the Sunni awakening and the Sons of Liberty. So I just want to let you know that. And he's like, you're dismissed. Thank you. So didn't go well for me. I got put in the FRIC, which was the Forced Reintegration Cell, and I started doing my own thing. I started running reintegration missions. I started meeting with Taliban. I started calling Taliban in the Quetta Shura and the Peshawar Shura in Pakistan. I set up a cantonment area in Jalalabad. I was going to bring in about 100 senior level, well, 10 senior level Taliban, 100 mid-level, and 500 regular soldiers, Taliban. Had everything set up. I was working with the commanding officer of the FRIC, who was an Canadian Army 2-star general. Loved what I was doing. He's like, just go do it. I'm going out on reintegration missions, talking to Taliban. I'm like, no me shubachis, what's your name? And they're like, oh, no me ma, whatever. And I'd be like, chikar me kuni, what do you do? What's your job? And I'd be like, man, this is the funniest one. This guy comes up to me and he goes, man, Taliban astum. He said, I'm a Taliban. And I go, Shuma Taliban based, man Taliban astum. I'm like, you're not a Taliban, I am. We start laughing. And I go, no, Rusti, what do you chikar me kuni, what do you do? He goes, I'm a teacher. They pay me money to come here and say I'm Taliban. So I'm able to talk to these people and, understand what's really happening and get a different picture of the war than most people ever got.
Yeah.
I'm talking to Taliban. I'm talking to ANA who are out putting bombs on roadsides at night, but they're on the ANA in the daytime, or they're paying their brother to do it. And then they're telling me, Jim, don't go down that road tomorrow. I'm like, why? There's like, there's going to be a bomb there. I'm like, well, why are you telling me? Because you're my brother. I don't want anything to happen to you. But I don't want anything to happen to my brother, so he gets paid. So why don't you just go tell the engineers that there's... So this is how screwed up it is. I literally meet with President Karzai's brother, the one who was assassinated, Wally, I forget what his name was, I'm sorry. And he says, now he's running narcotics, he's doing prostitution, got more heroin than you want to know. He's being paid off by the CIA. He's being courted by DOD. And I sit down with him and we're in a room and I'm like, you're lucky I'm not in charge. He goes, what do you mean? I go, I'd fly a helicopter in here, pick you up in your compound, fly you out in the desert, and put one right between your head, between your eyes. And he's like, Jim, you don't understand this war. And I go, oh, I do. And I know how to end it. And I said, he says to me, sometimes you have to do a little bad to have a little good. And I said it in Dari and didn't really understand it, the translation, but I knew and had privy to so much information and insights, and it was so frustrating for me being in Afghanistan and watching the people. People lived in abject poverty. No running water, no electricity. I spent a week in a village, and at the end of my week out there, the village elder comes up to me. He's, Jim John, you can pick a goat. And I'm like, no, I can't take a goat back to me to base. And he's like laughing at me like, you idiot. He's like, pick a goat. And I'm like, no, I'm not allowed to take a goat back. And he's like, pick a goat. And I'm like, that one. He walks over, takes a knife out, slits its throat in front of me and says, tonight we feast for our brother. this is the population, the people, the culture is amazing.
Yeah.
And we come in and don't know how to interact with the culture at all.
How was it for you? Because a lot of the Taliban, were Pashtun and whatnot. Like you speak Dari. How are those interactions? Because you don't speak Pashtun, correct?
No, and Pashtun, believe it or not, is like Klingon. You speak Dari and you listen to somebody speaking Pashtun, and you're like, you can't even understand it. So it wasn't bad because where I operated was mostly Dari. And but when I would go down to Kandahar or Jalalabad, everybody's speaking Pashtun.
Yeah.
And it made it really challenging. But I will tell you a funny story. I'm in the governor's complex.
Yeah.
And I was sick. I had the Kabul crud. And I'm in like 105 fever, chills. I'm like dying. And I'm like laying on the couch in the governor's office. And they forget that I'm in there because they all leave. And, the sick American guy. And they come back in, and there's Taliban, there's ANA, there's AMP, they're meeting with the governor, you got narcotics traffickers, they're all talking, they don't know I'm on the couch. And I let them talk for about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Hilarious. They're talking about who's doing what and everything. And finally, I just popped my head up. And they're like, holy shit, we didn't know he was in here. And they start talking in Dari about me and there's some guys talking in Pashtun, and the governor's like, oh, Jim John, whatever. And the one guy was saying something about me, and I could hear him in Dari, and something about I forget what it was, just somewhat threatening. Anyway, I walked up to him, and they didn't know that I spoke Dari. And I said to the guy, I understood everything you said. I speak Dari. And the whole place got silent. And I said, and he's like, said something to me like, who are you or what do you do? And when the Russians invaded Afghanistan, they had these guys who were spies. And the Afghans called them jasus, which meant spy, but it meant killer. And when he looked at me, he said, what do you do? And I just deadpanned him. And I went, Man jasus system. And the whole place got silent.
Yeah.
Because these are the guys who would come in the middle of the night and kill all families and everything. And they were like, fuck, gone.
Right.
So that's kind of just one of the interactions. I mean, so it was just an amazing time for me. I'm out there reintegrating, talking to real Taliban, trying to set up this stuff. So here's the kicker. Petraeus finds out that I am doing all this shit because I brief him. I'm briefing the 2s and the 3s and the 5s, and I'm like, I set all this up. He puts the kibosh on it. I'm not going to allow this to happen. So at the same time that Petraeus is putting the kibosh on this, I'm going to my Canadian 2-star general, and I'm playing rugby out in Kabul at the compound with all the ISAF guys. I start getting interviewed by Paula Broadwell. I don't know if people remember this, but Paula Broadwell was the writer for General Petraeus' biography, All In. And he was all in. He was balls deep. And I knew it. And I was telling everybody, he is banging her. No, not General Petraeus. No, he's awesome. Mitzi McFate is an advisor on my board. And she would tell me how Petraeus would hit on her all the time, and he's a creeper. And I'm like, okay. So Petraeus puts the kibosh on this. I'm pissed off. I'm like, fuck you. You're not going to ruin everything I worked for almost a year for. So I take the mightiest sword I have, the pen, and I start writing. I start writing articles in Small Wars Journal. I start writing articles for other periodicals, and I pen an article for Tom Ricks. Tom Ricks was he ran the Best Defense Journal for Foreign Policy. And I write an article called The Karzai I Knew Then, The Karzai I See Now. And it was talking about how effed up American operations were. how they were cycling in and out, how there was no coordination, there was no continuity, how every different ISAF country had their own agenda, how every PRT didn't align. And I basically laid it out saying that it wasn't Karzai's fault, that he was just trying to stay alive. He didn't want to wind up like Najibullah with his head on a stick outside of Kabul. And I'll never forget, I'm sitting in my little cubicle with my little headphones on, all fat, dumb, and happy. And I hear on the commander's update brief, "Who the fuck is Lieutenant Commander Sisco? I want him in my fucking office immediately. I'm going to find the fastest horse, the shortest tree, or the tallest tree, and the shortest rope to hang him by his balls." Rick's changed the title of the article to the Karzai see then. The Karzai knew then, the Karzai see it now, but he has good reasons for weirding out. Went over like a turd in a punch bowl. And anyway, the U.S. forces decide that that article was justification to kick me out of Afghanistan. So I got PNG'd out of Afghanistan by my own country. President Karzai loved the article. I called Ricks and said, "Hey, man, you got to change the title of this." He's like, "Can't do it. It's already out in publication." He said, "But I'll hook you up." So he said, he put in an addendum in. "I understand Lieutenant Commander Sisco is taking some heat from his superior officers. I suggest you look at the content of the article, aside the title." I took that on my own to change it. But that ruined my career. It was over for me. As a naval intelligence officer who was on the fast track, who was going to be a White House fellow, who was, hand select by General McChrystal, who learned Dari, and at that moment, my career was just a fireball.
Yeah.
And, I couldn't really recover from that one. And, I go back and I get assigned to DIA and I work for General Flynn. And by this time, I'm kind of just pissed because, I got passed over for commander. And at that point, I didn't care because I had 23 years in, with my enlisted time. So They couldn't fuck with my retirement. But I go to DIA and I go to ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. What a fucked up organization. That is supposed to be the pinnacle of the intelligence community, where they coalesce all of the different intelligence community organizations to work together. And it was a joke. And I worked for the NIM, the National Intelligence Manager, doing Southeast Southwest Asia. And I was the Afghan expert. And it was a joke. Because that organization, and we talk about our time with Trump coming in and SecDef and, making decisions. Get rid of ODNI. It didn't solve anything, made it worse. It's all about budgets. Geographic areas don't even line up to the COCOMs. It's a total joke. Eliminate that, and you will eliminate half of the problems in the intel community.
What
didn't make it better?
When you were there, what was the supposed job of the ODNI? Like, what were they doing, like, from an administrative function, or what were they supposed to be doing?
They were supposed to be coordinating all of the different activities within the different organizations in the intelligence community. ODNI would be the umbrella for CIA, DIA, NSA, NGIC, NGA. And what happened was every organization would bring a liaison officer. They would sit in the different directorates and NIMS, but it just created another bureaucratic layer. It didn't help operational capabilities or enhance them or optimize them at all. As a matter of fact, it lessened them because now you created another layer of bureaucracy. Like I said, the geographic areas didn't line up, and it turned into a food fight.
Uh-huh.
There's so much redundancy within the intelligence community. You could eliminate, I would say, 70% of the intelligence community and not have any impact on operational capability. Let me give you an example. When I was still in Afghanistan, I'm sitting in the General Petraeus brief, and they fly in an expert from the Defense Intelligence Agency. This expert is an Afghan regional expert and a subject matter expert on President Karzai. He gets up there and delivers a 45-minute presentation on President Karzai. He talks about his childhood, his family, his brother, his father, blah, 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 blah. And he gets done with his presentation. And he's like, gets his coin from General Petraeus, and they're taking pictures, and he's like all happy about himself. Look at me, I'm with General Petraeus talking about President Karzai. Now everybody's getting business cards from him, and they're harumphing him, and I wait and just watch and just sit down and wait till the end, and the crowd's dying out. And I walk up to him and I go, and I said this intentionally. I said, "Hey, I saw your brief." And I didn't say it was a good brief. I didn't say it was a bad brief. I just said, "I saw your brief." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, it was really good, wasn't it?" And I go, "No, I think that brief sucked." I go, "I didn't think you know shit about President Karzai." Now, this guy just got kicked in the junk. And he's like, "What? What?" And I'm like, "You don't know shit about President Karzai." I go, "You probably can do a Google search and you just regurgitate a bunch of crap." He's like, "Well, how do you know? What do you know about President Karzai?" And I go, "I've had dinner with President Karzai. I've met his family. I've traveled with President Karzai. I rode his horse," which is another story. And he's like, "What?" And I go, "And if you were such a Karzai expert, you would know who I am, because I was the military liaison for him for almost 9 months. And you never sought me out." So that gives you an example of like the intelligence community. I want to be that Jack Ryan. I want to be briefing General Petraeus on President Karzai. I want to get that coin. And in a nutshell, that's kind of why when I got PNG'd and I got out of the Marine or out of the Navy and out of Naval Intelligence, I really wasn't that hurt.
Yeah.
I really wasn't. I was like, it's not an organization I'm going to miss.
You mentioned Balad, that you were in Balad, but you didn't really talk about an Iraq deployment. What was that about?
So I did a couple other deployments, and in between, you just
Right.
go to Ethiopia and go work for Ambassador Yamamoto.
Yeah.
And go teach
20 years is a long career. So yeah.
Go teach the Ethiopian National Defense Force how to fly tactical UAVs, and then go deploy them to Somalia.
Yeah.
We don't talk about like a lot of the tours that I've been on and the things I did.
Yeah.
And going to Balad, and and so for me, I just focus on the big stuff.
Yeah.
Afghanistan, and don't really talk about like.
Is Afghanistan kind of where your heart was during the GWAT?
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, I got introduced to a culture that was amazing.
Yeah.
The people were resilient, and I mean, I saw things. And I could see the train wreck happening, and was telling people the train wreck's happening, and they wouldn't listen.
Right.
Like I would watch the ANA soldiers, the AMP soldiers getting training. I would watch through night vision goggles, throwing their boots over the fence that they just got issued by the American forces so they could get blowjobs through the fence.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is not a fighting force. Even the Special Operations Command, where I was training with them, I was assigned to SIFSOC for a period of time. They were even trash. And I could only scream at the top of my lungs as loud as I could. But here's my retribution. I'm married. I retired. I am at home. Doorbell rings. My wife answers the door. She comes scurrying to me, looks kind of weird. Upset. "Jim, I think you need to go out this front door. There's 2 guys in suits waiting for you." I go, "Okay." I walk out. 2 guys in suits. I look at them. I go, you here for the Petraeus thing? They look at each other like they're in shock. And they go, what? I go, for the Petraeus thing. Is this why you guys are here? And they go, yeah. How did you know? And I go, what took you so long? I got subpoenaed to testify in the grand jury investigation against General Petraeus. All of the information that I was giving Paula Broadwell, which was all top secret, SCI, everything about the cantonment areas, my reintegration missions, everything, she kept. And when they raided her house, had my name all over it. So they come to me. Hey, man, what do you know? I'm like, I know enough to bury this guy. The subpoena, I got issued. They never had the grand jury investigation. Went away. However, now I'm the president and founder of ENODO Global, my company, Risk Advisory Service. I'm in New York City for a conference, and I'm on a panel with General Petraeus. Everybody's totally sucking his dick, asking him questions. Hey, sir, what about this? What about the troop surge? What about this? And there's about 4 of us on the panel, and we're just being ignored. And one of them is the CEO of Cambridge Analytica, who I'm friends with. So Petraeus, gets asked another question, and he tells this little, long diatribe about Iraq. And he gets done. And once again, I lean in. You're wrong. But everybody looks at me. Everybody in the audience, the panel, and the moderator's like, excuse me? And I go, he's wrong. And let me tell you why. And I just laid it out. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, right down the line. And he sat there and listened. And the CEO of Cambridge Analytica goes, Mr. Sisco's analysis is spot on. I can confirm. Petraeus gets up. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to leave. Walks by me, and as he walked by me, he goes, good seeing you, Jim. And I go, take it easy, David. So who else was a private in the Marine Corps, worked his way up, did all this stupid stuff, Desert Storm, all this stuff, ensign in the Navy, SEAL team, all these fun adventures, and half of the stories I haven't even told, that are super cool.
Yeah.
And then makes his way to the, going to be a White House fellow, hand select, and then in an instant.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. That's
the
wild.
good news is I have a great reputation within my community and the Marines and Recon, and an outstanding reputation within my community as a Naval Intelligence officer. And at the end of the day, I don't care.
Right.
The real thing I care about, I want my kids to watch this. I want my kids to know how an exciting life I had. I want my kids to take my footsteps. Question authority. Ask why. Don't be average. Do the things that you want to do. Live a life worth remembering. And, I appreciate the time being on here. And I don't self-promote. I'm not a Jocko Willett or David Goggins. But I know my story is more powerful than theirs. And more powerful than a lot of people. But I just don't want to tell it because I'm just Jim.
Yeah.
I'm a humble guy. And I've had an amazing career and have an amazing life. And I have an amazing life ahead of me.
Well, we deeply appreciate you coming on a show. Where can people find you, Jim?
Well, I have my own podcast. It's called The War Journal, and it's on YouTube. But I'm not like that social media guy on Instagram and Facebook, And the other thing you can do is, this is the book that I wrote. And this is the book that I wrote about my time in Desert Storm. But it's not a book, there I was killing bad guys. And this is a cool picture. This is me as a Lance Corporal getting my blood wings punched into my chest on LZ Osprey in Camp Lejeune. But let me tell you quickly about the book. It was a journal. and it's right here.
Yeah.
This journal I wrote in almost every day when I was in Desert Storm. And this journal was like, here you go. I mean, it's got some years behind it.
Wow. That's amazing. That's the one thing I wish I had done during my service and time after was journaled stuff.
Yeah. So that journal I wrote in every day, and then I went through a terrible situation in my life. I went through a terrible divorce. And anybody out there watching, divorce is the ugliest thing in the world. It brings out the mean, evil in people. My ex-wife, I can't talk badly about her, but I saw a side of her that was worse than anything I've ever seen in any of my combat deployments. And I'm still in a custody battle for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through probably one of the darkest periods of my life. We talk about that time in Desert Storm where Mike gets blown up. I find out that Ashley's cheating on me with him. That pain that I felt is a microcosm of the pain that I felt for, I would say, years, months, definitely, months, years. I was in the darkest period of my life.
Yeah.
I went to this journal and I opened it up and I read it. And when I got done reading it, I was spent. I was done.
Yeah.
I wish that I had read that journal throughout my life, because it would have prevented me from making some of the mistakes that I made.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote the book, is because I want other people, and it's not just military, anybody, to not go through what I've gone through. If they can read about what I've gone through and learn from it, I win.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tell one last kind of story.
Yeah.
I'm like really depressed, dark depressed. And sitting at my house late at night. My kids aren't in the house, all by myself, lonely. The book had come out, and I get a call. Like, you know how when you see the cell phone, you don't know the number, and you're like, who the hell is it? And I just picked up the phone. I'm like, good evening, Jim Sisco. And there's a voice on the other end. He goes, hey, Jim, I watched your podcast. I was with Marianne Petrie and Melanie Davis, the publisher. We did a podcast. And they're like, hey, I got your contact information. I hope you don't mind me calling you. And I'm like, no. And it kind of brought my spirits. I'm like, yeah. He's like, hey, just let me tell you, like, I was in the Army and I was in Special Forces and I did 3 tours and I was in here and there. He was in Balad in the worst part, I think. And he started telling me like about his time over there, and it's like really dark. And he's like, hey, I just want to let you know something. And I'm like, yeah, what's up, man? He goes, I was suicidal. I was, I had suicide ideation. I didn't really know how to deal with all this stuff. And after I watched the podcast, I read your book. And he goes, brother, thank you. I now have purpose. I have meaning. If you can go through the stuff that you went through, I can do what I'm dealing with. And that, man, right there was probably one of those life-changing events. And that's why, I started doing the podcast. That's why I started talking more about myself and my career. If I can help anybody, one person, it's a win.
Yeah.
It's a win for me. And I'm doing a lot of work on family advocacy, trying to reform the court system, trying to make sure that children are protected. Started a project for veteran suicide. So I'm all in, and this is what I'm doing. And you guys have a couple 100,000 viewers, and they can hear my message, and it's a win for me. It's a win for you. And if there's anything I can do to help you guys, let me know. It's just
same,
who I
man.
am.
Absolutely, same. We have one question. Do we have anything on Patreon?
Yeah, we have one.
Oh, do you want to ask that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've been talking so much. You guys got questions, let me know.
No. We have a couple questions. So
Yeah, we have one from Luis Vasquez. What kind of open source tools do you use to find and help people with mental health struggles?
Awesome question. there is a phrase in Dari in Afghanistan I learned, and it says, if you stand on the corner, the wind will blow and tell you. So we use, and what you mean by that, people love to talk. People want to talk. And they will tell you that they are, hurting or they're suicidal or have suicide ideations, but we don't listen as a society. And the VA is the worst tool in the world because all they do is they want to enroll you and medicate you and you're on a list.
Mm-hmm.
What open source tools do we use? Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. We're in Reddit. There's a Reddit group, for Marines, for Navy, for Army. And it's the narratives that they're using that you just got to listen.
Mm-hmm.
When people say he lost the battle, he brought the war home with him. You look at the periodicity of their post, if they're increasing, if the tone and inflection is changing. The simple things and cues, the pictures, the memes, the emojis, how are they talking? We can identify people who are moving in that direction and interdict before they do commit suicide.
Do you want to tell people what the name of your the veteran organization is, or the?
Yeah, it's my company. It's called ENODO Global, and ENODO is Latin. It means to solve or elucidate. And here's the terrible story. I was so driven to do this, and we used the methodology that I learned in Afghanistan and in the data analytics to come up with this pilot project. I briefed the head of the VA. I'm sitting with the head of the VA and looking across the table at her and saying, we can reduce veteran suicides by 30% in 24 months. And it's only cost $500,000 to start the pilot project. She was like, okay, this is great. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate you. I'll put you in touch with, our project manager. 6 months later, I'm told by the project manager that they didn't have the funding and that would have to reapply the next fiscal year. I wrote the head of the VA and I said, in the 7 months, I did all the calculations. We've lost over 318 soldiers, airmen, and sailors, and this. We've lost this, we've done this, and we've done this. And your administration and your organization has spent over $75 million on X, Y, and Z. And you can tell me you don't have $500,000 for a pilot project?
Right.
That's what gets me upset. But so we created this whole project where we look at and listen to the social media discussions, what's happening, and then we find high-risk individuals, and then we interdict. But we don't just send them to the VA because the VA is not going to fix the problems.
Right.
The VA is going to medicate them, enroll them, get them therapy. What we do is we identify what the problem is of that individual. Is it financial? Is it marital? Is it divorce? Is it dependency? Is it PTSD? Is it TBI? And then direct them to the organization that can best serve them with the resources that they have that are tailored. And I hate the whole veteran suicide bullshit where it's 22 a day, equine for veterans. Let's go talk about this. That's just mowing the lawn to kill the weeds.
Yeah.
Doesn't kill the weeds.
Yeah. What's the other one, D?
The other question is for V. What are the best skills to practice and learn for a career in intelligence?
Wow. Honestly, I have an intern at my company, David Isaacs, and he's a brilliant kid, and he wants to be in naval. He wants to be in the intelligence community, and he will be successful if he gets in. And the reason why, and here's why, the skill sets are important. Analytical thinking, number one. Critical thinking. It's most important. That you are able to look at things analytically. The second thing is to be a critic. In other words, you'll get too many people in the intelligence community who've done 10 years here, 20 years here. I know this, I know that. I was working in Latin America, another project thing, and I'm working with a CIA case officer, arrogant cocksucker. And he says to me, and I go down there, and I'm like, just trying to get the lay of the land, and comes in, he's like, let me tell you about this, and let me tell you about that. I've been running people, sources here for 20 years. I know these people like the back of my hand. What are you going to do and come in here, and what are you going to tell me? And I said, you've been here 20 years? You heard me. You've been running sources? Yeah. You know the people like your back of your hand? Yeah. Well, why is it still fucked up? And all the guys around him started laughing, like, oh, man. So the point is, don't become so full of yourself and don't rely upon anybody else's opinions or ideas or beliefs like that DIA guy who didn't know shit about President Karzai. Mm-hmm. Think critically, be analytical, be technically proficient, but always question why. If you ask why all the time, you're going to uncover things that no one else does. People will tell you stuff. Hey, you know what? Yeah, this happened because of this. Just go, why? It's probably my biggest piece of advice.
And then one question from here. Corbin, I don't know where you're coming from, brother, but thank you very much. Could the most recent hearings on the UAP program be related to the latest Department of Defense fiscal audit? Thanks for great stories.
I have no idea. I am so far removed from the intelligence community and the administration. I'll tell you what, here's a contentious thing. The SecDef appointment. Everybody's like, oh my God, how did he get appointed? What's he going to do? I think it's a good move. And here's why. You're bringing in someone from outside the culture.
Right.
He can introduce fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. He can introduce and question why. I think the current SecDef, the old SecDef, is a total piece of shit. I have no respect for a lot of the senior officers within the military right now. They're sellouts. They're politicians. Yeah. And I would love to be in the administration. I would love it. It would be go back to OD&I. Lieutenant Commander Sisco retired is the director of the Office Director of National Intelligence. I'll tell you what, people would be shitting themselves because they know that I know the inside skinny at the NSA, at the CIA, at DIA, at NGA, and they would be very scared. I would eliminate probably 40% of the CIA's budget because it's just crap. I would eliminate the redundancy in DIA with NGIC and NS. 99% of NSA's collection never gets analyzed. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyway, sorry to digress.
No, that's great. No, we appreciate it. So check out ENODOglobal.com. That's ENODO global.com. Check out Jim's book, War Journal.
It's the War Journal, a young Marine's discovery of critical life lessons from Desert Storm.
Perfect.
There's a couple War Journal books out there, but once again, the book is about life. The book is about lessons. The book is not about combat. You want to read about combat, go talk to Jocko or David Goggins or any of the other 5,000 soft guys who are like, yeah, I had my M4 looking down the barrel.
Yeah. So, Jim, thank you so much for your time. We deeply, deeply appreciate you sharing a Friday night with us.
Hey, there was no place that I would rather be, honestly. I was happy to wear my Navy shirt, happy to be the first Naval Intelligence officer on your podcast, and I hope your fans like it. I hope your audience like it, and I hope you like it.
Well, we like it. We like it a lot. Dee, do you know who we have on next week?
Yep, next Friday we have Craig Jorgensen, former LRP in Vietnam, so that should be good.
Former Vietnam LRP, perfect.
Yep. Guys, don't forget to go to our Patreon, patreon.com/theteamhouse, the best way to support. Or you can buy a bed if you want from Ghost Bed.
Yeah.
The link is in the description.
Or even a pillow. Their pillows are nice.
Pillars
too.
are banging.
Yeah.
Also, one more thing. Eyes On has its own YouTube channel. The link is in the description. Check it out. We have Andy Milburn, Jason Lyons, Mick Mulroy every week. So check it out. We talk more about like topical geopolitical stuff. So the link is in the description as long as a Patreon. All the links for Jim are in the description.
Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, please.
Beautiful.
I am liking and subscribing. I already have.
And you also have a YouTube channel, The War Journal, correct?
Yep, the War Journal. It's the only platform I'm on, and I do it for my audience and for people. And like I said, I don't want to be a content creator. I don't want to compete with you guys.
There's
I
no
just wanna get my
competition. There is
message.
plenty of space in this world for everybody. So
Exactly, and
So-
I'll do everything I can to support you guys.
yeah, same here. Check out the War Journal podcast or YouTube streaming channel also. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a great night. Thank you
Thank
Jim,
you,
for being
guys.
with us. Thank you, man.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.